Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, just 12 months ago, the LibDems were riding high. Part of the coalition government, they were never far from a ministerial car and a team of civil servants ready to do their bidding. What a difference a year makes. Battered at the general election, they were slung out of office and their number of MPs in London reduced from 7 to just 1. They say the mayoral election is where the fight back begins. So are they right? Andrew Cryan has been out on the campaign trail trying to find out.
Winning elections in one of the most diverse cities on earth takes you to all sorts of places. This week, two-time London Assembly member and the Liberal Democrat candidate for mayor, Caroline Pidgeon, was courting Sikh voters and using it as a backdrop for her next party election broadcast. When you ask Liberal Democrats, they'll tell you that this election is where their fight back begins, not just here in London, but for the whole country. Which is all very well to say, but how on earth do you do it?
Well, I talk about the issues that matter to Londoners. I talk about my record of 8 years on the London Assembly, out there talking to people about housing, about how we can build more homes across London, how we can improve the private rented sector, talking about real issues that affect people's everyday lives. That's what they're interested in, and that's why I think we're getting a lot of support.
So, what exactly are these policies which the Lib Dems claim voters are so warming to? On housing, they want to build 200,000 new homes, in part paid for by putting 20 quid a year on Londoners' council tax bill, in a similar way to how we paid for the Olympics. On transport, she wants the tube to be half price before 7:30 in the morning, and to introduce a flat 1-hour bus fare. She also wants to see investment in childcare paid for by a £2 charge on hotel rooms.
The Liberal Democrats are, I think, going for it's a very moderate set of proposals. I think anybody would read Caroline Pidgeon's policy platform and say there was much in it that couldn't be adopted either by Labour or the Conservatives, or indeed by, most reasonable politicians. It's reasonably non-political, and in fact, if you look at their website, a lot of what Caroline Pidgeon's been doing is classic Liberal Democrat campaigning, which is out at a road or a school or with a particular local problem.
But one thing that is different about this campaign is the party's name. On the ballot, they'll be called Caroline Pidgeon's London Liberal Democrats. According to Mark Littlewood, the party's former director of communications, the whole campaign is a bit lacklustre.
Her aim is surely a relatively modest one, to get the Liberal Democrats sort of back into the foothills of electoral credibility, to maybe get 5% or more of the vote, to retain 1 or 2 Assembly members. And I wonder whether she should have done something a bit more radical and eye-catching. I think a bold policy on airports would have been interesting. Could there be a more liberal approach to drugs policy? Now, that's not the sort of thing that gets you to 40 or 50% of the vote, but given that she has absolutely no chance of winning, why not actually put a kind of flag in the ground on a couple of core Liberal issues, which I think would appeal to a smallish but nevertheless measurable segment of the electorate who think in Liberal terms.
But back on the campaign trail, Caroline Pidgeon's London Liberal Democrats are upbeat, confident they'll do better than in recent elections. Having been beaten so badly, doing worse could mean something close to obliteration.
And I'm joined now by Caroline Pidgeon. Welcome to the programme. You say this election is where the fight back begins. I mean, isn't the truth that the party has done so badly at the last elections in London and the general election that anything other than near obliteration is a fight back?
No, not at all. We've seen since the general election in London our vote going up. We've won several by-elections in London, including a ward in Vince Cable's old parliamentary seat, which we never won, even when he was the MP. So we have seen our vote growing. But what I'm finding is a really fantastic response from people across London, liking what we're saying, liking that I've got 8 years' experience at City Hall.
Yes, they may like what you're saying, but as Tony Travers said in that film, they're policies that could be adopted by any of the other parties, and they may well do exactly that. There's nothing distinctive Liberal Democrat that's going to suddenly propel you to City Hall?
Oh, I think absolutely. The whole manifesto is distinctively Liberal Democrat, very clear policies that I've been working on over the last 8 years on the London Assembly, building the homes we need, having effective fare cuts at half-price fares by 7:30 in the morning to really help low-income earners going into work. Very clear things. Childcare. I'm the only candidate who's talking about the costs of childcare in London. Being a mum myself with a 2-year-old, I know only too well how eye-watering the costs are for childcare in London. We need to be tackling these major issues.
Why have you rebranded the party with this new name, Caroline Pidgeon's London Liberal Democrats? I mean, did you run that past a focus group and they thought it was a good idea?
We're making it very clear that in this election you're not only voting for mayor, you're voting for the London Assembly. And on the orange ballot paper, to be very clear, Caroline Pidgeon's London Liberal Democrats will elect a team of Liberal Democrats who will hold whoever is mayor to their promises. It's a very distinctive way of linking the mayoral election with the Assembly.
I can understand that, but your name is obviously there because you're the mayoral candidate. Isn't it then about personality? Because that's what the previous incumbents and the current one have done. They are big personalities.
Yeah, well, I'm known across London. I've been working hard for the last 8 years on different issues across London, from transport to policing to housing. And so my record of action for 8 years, as well as my profile in this election, is making sure people are very clear. If you like what Caroline's saying, you can vote Caroline Pidgeon's London Liberal Democrats on the orange ballot paper and guarantee that every vote counts to get Liberal Democrats elected to City Hall.
Right. Do you have that sort of profile? Wouldn't it be better to concentrate on the big prize, which is to be mayor? Or is it an admission that actually, realistically, it's going to be much more about the team because you won't be the next mayor?
Well, it's quite clear in this election that the profile of the mayoral candidate is what everyone focuses on, and therefore we're making it very clear Caroline's getting all this coverage. If you like what she's saying, and people are on the doorsteps, this is how you can also vote for her and her team to make sure we've got people at City Hall holding the mayor to their promises and making sure whoever's mayor, including myself, they keep their promises and they deliver for Londoners.
Let's have a look at some of those policies. You say you've been working on them for the last 8 years. Housing, as I talked to Sian Berry, the detail, to charge people £20 on their council tax bill to pay for more housing. How much will that raise?
Well, let's just be clear. This is what people have been paying in London for the last 10 years. We've been paying it for the Olympic Games, so we'd be keeping it at last year's level. It works out about 32 pence a week, and from that we can raise around £80 million a year, £86 million.
It's not much, though, is it, to deal with the housing problem?
Well, what we do is we then use that to fund borrowing, and we could borrow around £2 billion, which would help us really invest in council housing across London and build the homes we desperately need. I'm the only candidate who's actually working out how we can raise money to put in to make sure we can fund the homes.
It's still quite small scale, because, I mean, we're talking about, what, 4,000 homes if you manage to raise £2 billion at the average London market price?
Well, what we're looking at is building 50,000 council homes over 4 years. Some are already in the budget at City Hall, so we're building the extra ones on top, and that's what our £2 billion helps fund. It's a subsidy of around 62,500 per property, and that, with the GLA land, means we can build the homes we need. None of the other candidates are talking about how they're going to get money in. Everyone's talking numbers of homes. I'm the only candidate who's got a clear costed policy to build more council housing across London, as well as support other housing in the capital.
And you said you're trying to raise money, and obviously building more houses is part of the answer, if not the main part of the answer. But, for example, in Southwark, the area you represented as a councillor for many years, the rebuilding of just one estate, the Aylesbury, is said to cost £1.5 billion. That's one estate, and that's only just under what you're going to raise overall.
Yeah, but, I mean, the estate there, if you look at how many homes you're talking about, it's huge. It's thousands and thousands of homes. But this, with the GLA land, makes it really makes it clear that we can build the council housing we need. But we've also got to tackle those in private rented accommodation. 1 in 4 people renting privately. We've got to tackle those rogue landlords. So I want to bring in licensing across London. I want to make sure that every landlord has a kite mark, so you kind of know this landlord is not going to rip me off. I'm not going to have these terrible letting agent fees. I'm going to get a good service to make sure those who rent privately are protected in London as well.
All right, let's look at another policy area, because Mark Littlewood also talked about having a bolder policy platform, gave drugs reform as an example of a strong Liberal policy that would attract perhaps a strong minority of voters. Should that be more of a focus in your manifesto, radical drugs reform?
No, we've got a clear policy nationally about evidence-based policy making around drugs. But, you know, when I'm out on the streets, when I talk to people, that's not the issue that comes up. It's tackling things like knife crime. It's about having more visible policing on the streets to make the community safer. And that's what our manifesto focuses on, putting youth workers and A&Es across London to make sure when that young person comes in with an injury, they can be diverted away from crime, diverted away from gangs and given the support they need.
Right, so it isn't a priority for you, even though, you know, it's a big deal for the National Party. security policy, but it's not for you.
It's not a priority in London. When I talk to Londoners, it's things like knife crime. It's about being secure on the transport network, which I'm the only candidate prepared to put money in to pay for 3,000 additional police on our tubes, trains and buses to make sure Londoners feel safe as they move around the city. That's the priorities I've had from Londoners, and that's what I'm going to deliver on.
Well, let's stick with the issue of security and policing. What do you make of the front page story of Sadiq Khan, the Labour candidate for mayor, and the fact that he shared a platform with a man convicted of terrorism in 2003?
I'm fed up of this mudslinging between the two main parties, quite frankly. We get this constantly all the time. The real issues are those that I'm focusing on for London. How we're going to tackle the housing crisis, how we're going to make sure people feel safe on the streets, how can we clean up the air in London. These are what people are talking about,
you don't
not
think
some
people
of
will
this.
be, you don't think people will be concerned about that, your prospective voters?
Well, I just think that there's so much mudslinging, nobody knows what to believe. And as a politician, you can be out somewhere, have a photo with someone on the street, you have no idea who they are, you're chatting to them, and then they could turn out later to be some extremist. You have to be very careful. But my focus is on the issues, and I wish the two main candidates would focus on how they're going to make a difference to Londoners and how we can make London work for everyone.
What would you advise your voters to do with their second preference?
I'm not in the game of promoting other candidates, it's up to them. I'm after Liberal Democrat votes for mayor and Liberal Democrat votes on the orange ballot paper to make sure we have a strong Liberal Democrat presence at City Hall in May.
Odds of you becoming the next mayor?
Who knows? But the more people who talk to me, the more I'm convincing people.
All right, Caroline Pidgeon, thank you very much.